we're probably going to lose if another half of these tetras. So we'll probably only have, 15 tetras in this entire tank, sadly. I dealt with my emotions in the live stream and in the last video, so I'm going to try to hold it together here, but you don't need to tell me what an idiot I am. Things happen, and I do get what I could have changed to have avoided it, and I talk about that in previous episodes if you're curious. Hello, my friends, and welcome to FISHTORY. I'm Alexander Williamson, of course, and here we are again looking at a fish room, fish house, where it's kind of a few days after I've decided that things need to be torn down, and I'm going to slowly start that process. But I kind of want to share with you guys how I am going to start that process so that it's not so overwhelming. So let me give you a quick update on the main tank that failed. And I did lose some fish in the other room due to the massive drop in temperature, but it was really the heater coming back on and turning the tank hot quickly that caused the tank to spike into the 90-degree range, and the thermostat on the heater didn't turn itself off. And my Inkbird was not plugged in because we had been using the extension cord for a little battery-powered light thing and a pump that we had running instead. Bad luck. So let's take a look at what I am doing to basically tear down a good chunk of the fish room and nature tanks that are getting really old, and how we're going to revitalize this place without tearing it down and, making these fish orphans. All right, so at the main tank, like I said before last time, I've treated it now for ick. You didn't want to treat it that first day for ick necessarily, because it pulls the oxygen out of the water when you use that ick or a lot of the products designed to kill ick. Now, we still do have a snail, and now he's happily underwater. Our nitrates are 0, our ammonia is 0, so that's all good. Our temperature is back to around 80, 78. That's all good. However, we lost a lot of fish, and I'm starting the process of clearing out things like, over time this would have turned into mulm. This would have, fallen to the bottom and turned into mulm. And because of the fact that I use whole foods and I also use things, like plant fertilizers, these plants have a really good nutritious load in them, and they're not just plain Jane plants. They're, selectively used because I'm trying to build up this fluffy mulm over time, which then turns into a very rich substrate. Now, I'm sad to say that almost all the fish in this aquarium did not make it. I believe Bob the betta, the giant betta, I believe he made it. We're going to put some bloodworms in here and see if anybody comes up. We've also got some of the black phantoms, but these are the red variety. And then we have these orange Bolivian lemon tetras, the orange-eyed lemons. And then we have some normal black phantoms still left. Other than that, I think all the imperial tetras, the rummy nose tetras, and a few of the other oddballs, I think they're all gone. We do have some of the autosynclus, both the striped and the original or just normal type of autosynclus, and we have one diamond tetra, and I am happy to report that Bob the betta is still alive. He's just been really shy since this chaos has unfolded in his little world. So this tank, we're going to start by basically slowly trimming everything. And the idea is, if you trim too fast, or if you take out all the floating plants or chop down, half the tank's plants at once, then all of that ammonia, nitrate, nitrites, all that ability to deal with that will no longer have surface area, nor the plants pulling that out of the water. So you only have your filter to work off of. And in a tank like this, the filter is doing some of the work of dealing with the ammonia, nitrites, and nitrates, but really it is the plants, the substrate, and the surface area that is home to a lot of the bacteria and the way that these tanks work, essentially. So we will get rid of the stem plants. We'll be looking closely to see which ones have algae on them as well, because with the ICX, I've noticed everything's out of whack now, and we have a thick layer of algae on things in some places, and it's Claudophora algae, which is a really difficult one to get rid of, kind of like kind of like blackbeard algae. We also have fungus growing again down in the substrate, but the snails are happily eating it, so it's not a harmful fungus. I think it's similar to the wood and tannin-loving fungus you get on new pieces of wood. Now over here, we've already begun the process, so you can get a sneak peek at what I'm talking about. So we take away a lot of the floating plants, and then we cut back everything but, for instance, the moss on the rock, or cut back all these stem plants down to a layer. Then we're going to start cleaning and siphoning this entire layer. If it's not already condensed down into a layer of substrate dirt, once I kind of compact it, then it's going to get siphoned up and tossed out. And that mulm will never get to be. But I will keep this tank just a little bit longer because I am curious where this is going. So I want to keep the core substrate of this one tank intact, but we're going to trim almost everything else down and rearrange the hardscape because the cat just loves it so much. And she says, I don't want it torn down, right? You don't want it torn down, do you? No. Oh, there's 2 cats. So anyways, that's kind of the plan, and let me show you in the fish room kind of the rest of the plan. I've been working at taking down tanks, and I just want to show you guys kind of the difference between a wholesale teardown of a tank and maintenance of a tank, where I show you guys in this tank here, this is a tank that is essentially ready for a move, a teardown, a buildup, whatever you want to call it or whatever you want to get ready to do. It would be ready for it, both with the filter here, with the extra filter in here, which is right under the flow of the water, so it's oxygenated and full of beneficial bacteria that would be able to be plugged in right away to, you know, an airline like the one right there in a tank somewhere else, and you'd be good to go. You'd have it all set up for your fish or shrimp in another tank. But what I'm going to be showing you here is you don't have to get rid of your entire ecosystem while you're moving your nature-style aquariums or your ecosystem-style aquariums. I love using the turkey baster, honestly. I use it for everything in the fish room. But I will use it as a very pinpoint sort of siphon for the aquarium. So I'll literally use it to just kind of kick up debris and then wait for that debris to settle a little bit and then siphon it up. Then, you know, if you watch the channel, you know I have these aquariums up here. And you'll say, Alex, what are those ugly aquariums, if you haven't been watching the channel? But if you watch the channel, you'll say, Alex, those are ugly aquariums, but I know what they do. So what they do is they each have a different kind of live food in them. So for instance, this one here, it's got a type of small scud in it. And that's what's swimming around in there. And that is what many of these fish live off of, almost completely now. I mean, they won't even eat fish food, these guys in this tank. So, same with elastomas, some of my wild betta species and things like that, they are very picky and they'll only eat live food. So what I do is I take the debris that is both fish poo and or any food that didn't get eaten in the last 24 hours, and I basically just, and by that I mean usually algae wafers, because I usually feed live food to this tank. And so feeding live food, you have very little left over. But then I'll put it into these tanks just to top off evaporation. But all that debris you can see goes right into the tanks, and it makes them like a boggy marsh. And I realize I'm spraying water all over the outside of these tanks as we speak. But then I can go into these tanks and I can pinpoint out a whole bunch of little scuds or daphnia or whatever it is that I'm culturing in each tank. And from there, I will have a nice meal for my fish, just ready to go. Basically, then I just squeeze it into the aquarium tank. And as I put this in the aquarium tank, you'll notice that it also kicks up other debris like algae, and this is Claudophora algae, or the Marimo moss algae that everybody probably recalls from a couple years ago when that was a big trend. Well, if you let it out of the little moss ball formation and it breaks off and starts colonizing your aquarium, it will get all over the place. Sorry, snail, I'm going to steal some of your food because you're just not eating it fast enough for my taste. So literally all I'm doing is I'm siphoning hot spots like you would in a gravel aquarium. And this is a very shallow substrate aquarium that basically gets RO water, so the TDS doesn't spiral up out of control. And it has a lot of flow, and the water level sits low because all these top level fish love to jump. And so I don't love to have fish outside the aquarium, obviously. And so we just keep the water level down. And so a 20-gallon tank becomes more like a 15-gallon tank when all is said and done. Also, most of these fish really like oxygenation. You know, we've got pistos in here, we've got little gobies, and then we've got some rainbow fish of various kinds in here as well, pseudomagills and others. And so that keeps them all aerated and happy. Alright, so I also have a lot of tanks in the nature style aquarium. So like this one here, there is no filtration going on, which means that we basically just need to move the fish themselves into a safe container and then save a little bit of the water because it's going to have the microbiome we want, and then move the hardscape. Beyond that, we just have to drain down the aquascape. Basically, we can gravel vac, cut plants, clean up mulch, change out gravel, add substrate or aqua soil, whatever we need to do, and pull out anything that we want to move or save for that matter. And it's good to save things with a lot of texture on them, little pieces of wood that have mulch and algae and aqua soil and things like that around them, rocks, and of course plants along with their roots. And then, you know, you drain the tank down, move it, and basically as long as you don't have a long way to go, if you're moving in the same house or moving around in the same house, you can just move it on your own with the help of friends, or you can buy for about 10 or 20 bucks some of these suction cups. And we've used 3 of these, and we moved an entire tank that had substrate yay thick, a good 5-inch thick substrate on a 60-gallon rimless tank, and we moved from my old house to this house with that and a couple of my friends helping me carry it. So once you get it situated, you basically get your bucket, which has your plants, the hardscape, and your fish that you transported, or maybe your fish are in breather bags or plastic bags of another sort. Maybe they're in a bucket with a battery-powered aerator, whatever it may be. Then all you need to do is plop them back in, put in the fresh water, and add that bit of old tank water and the hardscape or aqua soil back in or into the new tank, position it the way you want it, and it's pretty easy as far as literally moving the tank. So that's what we're going to do here, only we're going to take our time because we don't want to shock anything by remodeling too fast. As I've said several different ways now, when you have a tank that's old, if you're going to keep any of the old substrate of the old tank, you need to realize that that is part of your filtration, especially if you have no filter on the tank. So it's really easy to crash it if you're not running a filter. So you could either think ahead and get a filter ready so that you can just run the filter. Even if it is usually a filterless tank, you can run the filter for a while and get it acclimated. And see here, I've got a sponge getting ready to be acclimated for this tank so that when we move it, even if I remove a lot of this moss and stuff, it won't be a problem for the bettas in there. It'll still have good biofiltration, and it'll have mechanical filtration for a little while. Then I'll slowly transition it off of that if I feel like getting rid of the filtration. With a bigger tank or with tanks that have more aquascape and hardscape and stuff like that, it can be a more involved task to move them, but overall it's really just another version of that. You just don't want to tear things down too fast. If you notice that your plants are melting, or there's an algae bloom, or there's a disease outbreak or something like that, really try to handle that first. Otherwise it's easier to reset completely. But right now I am basically looking all around the fish room and realizing, okay, I need to downsize all these plants, trim them, propagate them, sell them, give them away, whatever it takes. And the same with some of the hardscapes. Some of these rocks and things, I might want new ones that aren't so covered in algae. In other cases, I want to make sure that I'm saving the rocks that have algae and biofilm for gobies and darters and other fish like that may be coming along for this little move around or shuffle that we're doing here. But basically right now I'm in the process of getting rid of duckweed. I'm in the process of trimming excess plants. In the process of, this was crowded with floating plants. Obviously we're gonna have to clean the glass all off. And things just really got away from me, kind of with the depression, pain, anxiety, and illness over the last few months. And so basically they're gonna go from looking like this, which actually works very well as a betta tank. So this one will stay this way for the sake of the bettas, although we may suction off some of the top water just to take care of this protein film that's built up over the last few weeks. But in here, for instance, we're just going to get rid of the mulm, and then we're just going to add substrate right to this. There's not a ton of plants. There's only a few plants, mostly crypts. And we're going to add substrate about 1.5 inches to it, and we're going to grab the big rocks, and we're just going to put down the substrate and then set these in. But here you can see we got another tank that I have where it's green water. That's not just algae and marmo moss like this, Claudophora as it's actually known scientifically. This is green water, and this is single-cell organisms clouding up the water. And while baby fish absolutely love this stuff, and it actually will promote the fish to spawn in here, I just don't like the look of it right now. I don't want it right now. This tank too, this tank's great. It is the reason why these little hovering loaches spawn in captivity for me. You know, I've mentioned it in several videos, but that is the spawn I am most proud of in the entire fish keeping hobby, is these hovering zebra loaches that they can't seem to figure out how to get them to spawn in captivity consistently. Yet we have over 15 in this tank that have been born in this tank, and down below we raised another 20 down there. So, you know, whatever it is, lots of plants have been good to this tank. It's just, I'm ready for a change. I want it to look better. And these tanks are so functional right now. They've got a cave right here, and they've got a sponge filter cover, or it could be an air stone cover and make it into a sponge filter essentially. But however you want to think of it, whatever you want to do, it's just not really laid out to be an aquascape or even to be a one species breeding tank. But we need to figure out a little bit more about what do we want to do. Scoot all these down and put another tank you can see escape on here? Or do we want to put breeding tanks here this way? So I need to still figure that stuff out. But I do want to tell you, as much of a mess as the tanks and the fish room are right now, we are making progress. So here too, you can see I've started to pull out some of this tangle of moss. The whole thing used to look just like this. And I'm getting the duckweed out and I'm getting the moss out. But what's very important, and I hope you're still watching this, my friends, is that you don't want to shock your nature tank. Whether you have a filter running or no filter, you don't want to pull all your plants out, especially all your floating plants or your duckweed or hornwort, anything that eats a lot of nitrates, nitrites, ammonia. That is very crucial. And also stem plants, if you have deep substrate that's old, that's very crucial to your ecosystem. And so is this mulm. So if you clean all this mulm and take out plants, your tank will likely have an ammonia spike, either from just the disruption of the nitrogen cycle that goes on in non-oxygenated parts of your tank. Disruption can cause a disturbance in the force, and you can end up losing fish in the next few days, or just stress them out, even if it isn't a crazy ammonia spike. And we're just going to keep doing this each day, a little bit to each tank, until they're basically cleaned up like this. And we can appraise whether we need to add more aqua soil, because so much of it has been cracked and turned into dust and mulm by both fish, snails, shrimp, and plant roots, or whether, like here, there's actually a decent amount, and there's sand underneath, and there's bacteria and all sorts of stuff going on in here that's probably functioning pretty well. So as long as you haven't built up too many layers, too many resets, you're probably going to be fine, and you'll be able to add another inch and add 3 or 4 more years if that's what you want to do. I'd love to hear if you have any thoughts or, you know, ideas that I should implement, but I definitely want to do a black water tank. I definitely want to do a Tanganyikan tank at some point. Your thoughts are much appreciated. And yet again, I still have all sorts of aquariums and tanks, something like 9 of them ready to set up. So whatever we choose to do, we can implement pretty quickly, especially when we've got filtration and everything ready to go. So thank you guys for watching, and I will talk to you next time, hopefully getting some more progress done right after we get through the Thanksgiving holiday.